opportunity for it. What we're trying to do is to provide all the finance and all the facilitation and advisory and twinning services to the big entities in Africa to enable them to grow and facilitate trade and also act as global champions as well. So we are also ensuring that these intra-African trade champions that we are supporting, they should also carry with them the SMEs to ensure that they are also included in their supply chains. We are also working on a number of financial initiatives for the SMEs. For example, we've developed a fully fledged SME program, which will cover capacity building, financing, and we are even lowering the thresholds to ensure that we accommodate SMEs. We are also looking at a technological platform or tool that will be used to actually support SMEs, where they could actually apply for support and get all the relevant trade finance and facilitation support that they need. We also have got a range of financial instruments like factoring, which includes invoice discounting, and also you will be able to have access to a number of services in terms of management of your books to ensure that you have got the liquidity, the capital that you need to continue running your business, especially if you're an SME. So finance is one of the key issues. We know that probably out of 10 SMEs that walk into a bank, about 7 of them, they are rejected. We are aware of all those challenges. We are now trying to engage with all the key stakeholders to ensure that we provide affordable finance, which is critical for ensuring that the SMEs are competitive. I just want to also highlight some of the things in the context of the AFCFTA. And we know that there are going to be adjustment costs. The bank has been working with the AFCFTA Secretariat to put in place an adjustment fund, which will help the governments to address tariff revenue loss and also the companies to deal with challenges relating to competitiveness and to also be able to import equipment to actually put in place new technology that will enable them to develop the competitiveness to be able to produce goods and services that can be traded under the AFCFTA. So these are some of the things that we are doing, and Afreximbank has already set aside $1 billion to contribute to the $8 billion that we estimate to be required in the next 5 years or so to support countries and companies to adjust under the AFCFTA. Maybe one key initiative from a technological perspective that I want to talk to Chair, if you permit, is what we call the Africa Trade Gateway. This is a game changer. This is basically a super platform which basically bring together all the key technological platforms that the bank has developed. So the first one is the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. We know that intra-African trade has actually been diverted because before we trade with ourselves, we try to look for the US dollars or the euros, but we are trading within the continent. A lot of trade is actually being diverted, and there are also costs in terms of the way in which the transactions are being done using correspondent banks. This adds costs, and we believe that with the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, which will facilitate payment in national currencies, in African currencies, we will be able to save about $5 billion. And these are basically issues that also affect competitiveness. We are also putting in place a trade information platform to facilitate access to trade and market information. Competitiveness is about that connection between buyers and sellers. So that platform will provide the requisite information that you need to identify markets, to identify buyers, to even, it can predict supply chains. It can facilitate the development of regional value chains. So we're going to rely on artificial intelligence to address some of the issues affecting the businesses and enable them to be competitive. That will also be supplemented by a trade regulations platform, because if you don't know the regulations, you also not be able to do business. And to add to that, we also have the customer due diligence repository that we call MANSA, that will enable the business people to be able to do KYC and know their partners. One of the challenges, Chairman, is that in Africa, we also don't trade with each other. We don't do business with each other because we don't know each other. We don't trust each other. So using this customer due diligence platform, you will be able to actually undertake KYC, and you will be able to then do your payments using the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. There are also online facilities for you to even apply for financing online. So we've got a number of initiatives that we've put in place to deal with the production issues, to deal with the industrialization issues, to deal with competitiveness. And these are the issues that we are working on. And we believe that working with the firms, our interventions are basically at the firm level and at the government level, at the continental level. We believe we'll be able to create an environment that is conducive for the CFTA to thrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gainmore. I think you have helped us pull in various pieces together from a regulatory point of view, from a technological point of view, and most importantly, we must put our money where our mouth is. So the investment aspect thereof is certainly a very important one. And I think I really find your example in terms of just using the example of the logistics aspects that cause such inefficiencies in our system, and how we can be able to unblock this. So we know the issues, we know the attendant challenges, we just need to get to remedy them so that we can get this productivity aspect to go up. So thank you very much for that. I think your input was so rich, and it took us through the different spheres, and we are happy that it is a continental institution that is contributing towards some of the issues. So let me go now to my colleague Omar-san, who has had quite some experience across the globe, and maybe ask him, why, despite knowing all this, you think, if in your comparative experience, we've not been able to address this issue in the continent over time. If you can just give us maybe a comparative context to it, so that, learning, as we say, is important from other contexts. Over to you, Omar-san.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Chair. Yes, the comparative issue is very important. We can learn each other. And so traditionally, we supported to learn from Asia for Africa. But now, it is the time to learn each other. There are many aspects for learning. For example, the AFCFTA, African Continental FTA. So the many speakers, Dr. Gainmore also mentioned that we are currently conducting so-called data collection surveys for African Continental FTA, Free Trade Area, where we can, any space to support for this drastic movement. Yes, then we are bringing the experience of ASEAN, East Asia, the communities, ASEAN's experience. What is the most important experience of ASEAN is to articulate the economy, trade, industry, investment, all these are put in together and grow steadily, not rapidly, but steadily, step by step, and taking actually the ASEAN economic community was the issued, launched in 2015. So that is, it took several decades to achieve this. So at the same time, yes, the AFCFTA, yes, the speed is very important, but also at the same time, gradual step is very important because obviously there are a lot of the conflicts of the interests of each parties. ASEAN is only 9 countries at the end. FCFTA, 54 countries. So obviously it is a not easy task. But also at the same time, for the long future, taking the long future, the long-term targets, this is also a good experience from ASEAN as well. And in AFCFTA's cases also, even though it is difficult, but if you have the common goals, obviously, so when you have the 54 countries integrated market, this is very, very attractive. So if you have the common goals, so this will be success. And for the industrialization, yes, the ASEAN has taken off much earlier, but also at the same time, the environment of the industry is, I think, not the same compared with before and now. Now, so there are a lot of the international regulations. So you need to comply with the many the international the rules and regulations. So I think this is the more difficult to do this. But again, at the same time, so there are a lot of the experiences, how to learn the productivity improvement. This is exactly what we are doing on Kaizen. So that's what Asian countries has done and African countries doing. And so Asian countries also learning from Africa in some aspects. So this kind of they're learning each other. JICA or Japan is also learning from the Africa, each other. For example, for the digitalization, the platform, the startup or leapfrog, reverse innovation, all these what we are learning. So what is important is that from the comparative views, yes, there are some differences, but also the commonalities. So we can learn each other. So that is what I can address. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Omas. And I think the takeaway there is, despite the uniqueness of the context, there are always commonalities that we can draw from. You can learn from us, we can learn from you. And also when we decompose the issues, there are areas that we can learn better, maybe from ASEAN and from other regions, as much as you can also learn given the unique contexts that we have faced here. Let me now turn on to Madame Nadine, because you have a unique position where you work with RECs, you work with government institutions, and the issues of standards, as been alluded to earlier, is important. So my question to Madame Nadine there would be, what in your position, or what would you say governments and regulatory bodies should do to make us achieve this competitive space that we want to attain?
Thank you very much, Judge. As I said in the introduction, there is this African Continental Free Trade Agreement, Free Trade Area Agreement, which was signed by 54 out of 55 African countries, and it is now has been signed, ratified by 37. These are the countries who have already deposited their ratification documents to the African Union Commission. And this agreement, in its article, Annex 6, Article 6, mentioned that all member states should become members of the ARSO and AFSEC. AFSEC is the African Electrotechnical Standardization Commission. These are the only institutions that are mandated to develop standards, and standards are there to facilitate trade among members. So these countries, meaning the 37 that have already ratified the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, are by default supposed to be ASO members in order to benefit or the facilitation. But now there is a challenge because some of them are not members, which means that there is an issue of not implementing the African trade, the AFCFTA agreement, because they will not be able to trade among the rest of the Africa. So you will find that most of the issues are related to the low level of knowledge of the importance of standards, even by the governments and the regulatory bodies. So there is a very big lack on the acceptance of the standards themselves. Some of the governments don't understand why they should invest in accepting or in implementing the standards, while maybe there are some costs involved at national level, or even they don't see the need of implementing the standard, but they forget that by ignoring the standards, they will not be able to move their goods to either regional or international market. So what is the government supposed to be doing is to look for a way of becoming members of the African Organization for Standardization and other quality infrastructure institutions, so that they can be able to get the link to the continental trade facilitation. So I can mention where some governments just prefer to continue using their national standards in a technical regulation. So there is a way of also doing this in a manner of, in terms of these standard national standards are withdrawn to adopt the regional or international standard. This technical regulation can be able to adapt, but some of them you find they have directly referenced certain national standards, and when they are withdrawn, it's very difficult to change and adapt to the technical regulation, which creates some confusion, and you find that some consignments are stranded on the borders, and no goods can move in or move out of the country. So there is greater need for creating awareness. This creation of awareness will be done either by continental standard organizations, can also be done by finance institutions, and we have some experience in awareness creation activities where we, through the Pan-African quality infrastructure, we created awareness of some high-level policy makers institutions. So we have had some awareness creation with the EAC Parliament, and we have also created awareness with the COMESA Business Council, and we have observed that there is a greater need for continuous mobilization so that the policymakers at government level know the importance of applying, adopting, the harmonized standards in order to unlock trade barriers. So I think that is the major issue to deal with, so that countries can be able to trade among themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Antonio. I think it's very important awareness. We need to be aware of this continentally, and it is true to many spheres that you find the very different levels of awareness amongst our very diverse continent and regions. I think pertinent to the issues you raised is alignment and commitment, standards conformity. If we don't get that, certainly we will be stuck even with the ACFTA, because there will not be conformity of standards, and of course mobilization of policymakers to ensure that they do that. So I think that really talks to the crux of the issue in order to ensure the attainment of productivity and efficiency. So let me invite Engineer just back for, I will not frame a question for him, but I think because you are in the private sector and you've seen the cascade of issues, maybe I start by asking you what your sort of closing remarks would be here, so that, in 2-3 points before we go to the rest, and then we'll wrap up this session. Engineer.
First of all, competition is here with us. This global competition is here with us in Africa. And out of the global trade, I think we only have 3% as our share of the global trade. And then we can see all these lines of containers coming into Africa. And then we are seriously thinking about improving our infrastructure so that we can facilitate this kind of trade, but facilitating competition. So I think what is critical for us is to make sure that we have a framework for promoting inter-Africa competitiveness, inter-Africa trade and competitiveness. And the issue here is, if we can depart from the nature of national sovereignty of competitiveness and look at the continental perspective and start talking to each other, this collaboration for competitiveness at the global level, at the continental level, what is it that is important for us as Africa to be competitive? And we know the issues. We have looked at the fundamental issues of innovation capacity at the various levels. But the critical level is the operation in silos of our various institutions. Do we all as a nation, let's take Tanzania for example, do we all have, as a nation, have consensus on what it takes for our country to be competitive? And are we speaking the same language? In academia, are we going to create the value-added human resource that will contribute to the competitiveness of our nation? On the financial institutions, what kind of facilitation can we make to the private sector and other institutions that will ensure that the continent is, or the nation is competitive? The private sector itself, are we talking to anybody else? Or is the private sector talking to each other? So unless we build a collaborative framework that will make sure that we have a shared agenda for African competitiveness, and that we have shared goals, agreeing that national competitiveness should cascade into regional competitiveness and eventually into continental competitiveness. Then if we don't do that, basically we'll remain with the 3%, and we are saying somebody who is down has only two options: either to remain down or stand up. And I think we will not opt for remaining down. We'll have to move forward and stand up. So if we are going to embrace this aspect of innovation as key to competitiveness, then we all should ask ourselves one question every day: what is it that I'm going to do today that is going to be so different from what I did yesterday, that will ensure the prosperity, competitiveness of my enterprise, my country, my continent? I thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Engineer. I think you couldn't have put it better in terms of the issues that we need to look at and reevaluate the issue of sovereign competitiveness and cascade it upward to continental. And I think that talks to the issues that have been with us for some time around the metrics of our regional integration, so that we, together as a continent, ensure that the different parameters of integration move in tandem to enable us. So I noticed that we are over time. I'm cognizant of that fact, but I will just ask if there is any of my other panelists who would have a strong urge to make any other statement before I try the almost impossible task of kind of rounding up this discussion. If there is one strong one, I know my colleague Gaynor certainly had requested to do so. So let me have you last the last one, Dr. Gaynor, and then I will try and close the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to at least appreciate the discussion that has been going on. And at Afreximbank, we really believe that we need to do more in terms of promoting intra-African trade. And there are certain products that are being imported from outside that should actually be produced within the continent. So the framework that was actually being referred to, the bank has already developed that framework. And we are putting finance, facilitation, and advisory services to ensure that that is implemented. Just to give you a practical example of some of these things, we are working with a number of countries to develop industrial parks, the clustering arrangements, to ensure that we improve on competitiveness. We are working on the Africa Quality Assurance Centers to ensure that our products are competitive. And most importantly, the national versus regional continental dimension is very important. What we are now trying to do at the bank is to organize the biennial trade fairs. We started with the one in Cairo in 2018, where we bring buyers and sellers together to actually connect, to discuss business opportunities. We were able to actually conclude deals worth more than $32 billion. And the next edition of the trade fair will be taking place in South Africa, Durban, from 15 to 21 November. This is also an excellent platform that is going to be discussing issues to do with competitiveness, industrialization, how we can support the implementation of the AFCFTA. So I would like to also invite all of you to participate in the second edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair in South Africa. And we hope that by working together, we can break down the silo mentality and focus on regional value chains, focus on collaboration to ensure that we develop the competitiveness at firm level, national and continental level, and ensure that we industrialize and take advantage of the CFTA. Thank you very much.
Just suffice it to say that additional information on the Intra-Africa Trade Fair can be found on the Afrexim Bank website. So let me try and do the insurmountable task of trying to pull all this together very, very, very briefly. So we've heard from the panelists on key issues around our productivity gaps, and I think our colleague Omasan looked at it as an internal constraint. We've also noted the issue of high entry costs resultant from poor infrastructure, poor transport costs, and I think Dr. Gaynor alluded to some of the challenges in the logistics process. The issue of capacity is something that we have all talked about and continues to be a nagging issue in terms of our productivity and improvement. So we need to look at how to invest in that regard so that we can get the attendant capacity, whether it be it for innovation, whether it be it for just the technical issues that we need to look around our industrialization and production. Again, the issue of weak entrepreneur capability, I think engineers will talk to this around innovation. Omasan also looked to it, and luckily Gaynor from the bank talked about some investments that are being done. So those are aspects that were noted clearly as attendant and need addressing. Lack of access to markets and business opportunities is a pertinent one that was certainly came across from the clear players, and I think with this, the attendant issue of standards that Mr. Tony talked about, because you cannot be trading when your standards are certainly not up to the requisite standards. The issue of finance is a big ticket issue. Luckily, we've identified that as a gap, but some initiatives from our local partners, the Afrexim Bank, African Development Bank, our partners, look into that issue. But I think the most important issue is to acknowledge, as we heard from the speech from Dr. Mayaki, and we heard from the speech from the Honorable Deputy Minister, is that small enterprises are the ones that drive the economy, and irrespective of whether the finances are available, but the sort of different challenges that makes that impossible for them to access, be it bureaucracy, be it policy issues, registration, and other qualifiers that the finances ask for. Certainly that is not going to change any situation. We've talked about unfavorable business environment from a policy perspective, and that ranges from the issue of standards, from the issue of regulation, and so on and so forth. So we need to attend those issues that might be called environmental and policy factors before we can surmount this challenge. I think an important issue that has been talked, particularly in the context of ACFTA, is the issue of the issue of continental, regional, and member state level. That those issues need to align so that the aspirations for which we work for, the Agenda 2063, are indeed consistent across all of our countries if we are to surmount that. I think my parting shot with this, before I hand over to our colleagues for the kind of finishing off of this session, is we heard from Dr. Mayaki that the quantum of jobs that we will need to create in order to meaningfully employ our population is such that we cannot ignore the issues that we mentioned. I think the diagnostics on the issues are clear. The challenge now is the implementation. With that, I'd like to thank our esteemed panelists who have not only made themselves available, but have also stayed with us for this long, because we are having lag, particularly for our counterparts in Japan. It's very late, I know, but we really thank you. And I think the session, 1 hour could not do justice to this session. So we hope that in the next design, we will have more than an hour so that we can even disaggregate the issues and go into breakout rooms and dig deep into some of the solutions. I thank you. It has been my pleasure and an honor to be the facilitator of this session. And I'd like to thank everybody and wish everybody a good evening, a good afternoon, wherever they are. Thank you very much, and back to you, Dr. Panis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George. And thank you, as you've said, to your esteemed panelists for the fantastic insights that this cross-continental panel has brought to the discussion. In the interest of time, and we are quite a lot over time, I will try to give a very brief wrap up of today's session before handing over to our colleagues from JICA for the closing remarks. So very briefly, colleagues, I beg your indulgence for the next 3 minutes, just to mention some of the points that came out from today's discussions. So, colleagues, for those of you who were not in this morning's opening sessions, we began with some opening remarks by Madam Ron Omar from the African Union Commission Department of Economic Development, Trade and Industry. She gave us some very useful insights into the introduction of Kaizen in Africa and the benefits to the African Union Commission itself from the application of Kaizen. She also noted that in Africa, we need to dedicate ourselves to improving the quality and productivity, and in particular to strengthening our institutions to do this. The ambassador of Japan to Tanzania, Mr. Sunichi Goto, emphasized the learning opportunities for African countries from Japan on the important role of SMEs, small medium enterprises, and the need for strong managerial skills for these SMEs. He also noted that Japan will focus more on promoting investments from Japan's private sector to partner with African countries and by respecting the African ownership and supporting their efforts within the spirit of partnership. Our third intervention of the opening session was by the Honorable Deputy Minister of the Prime Minister's Office in Investment, Mr. William Olenasha, who officially opened the conference. He congratulated, obviously, the winners of the Kaizen Awards and highlighted the need for governments to create a conducive, enabling environment for investment. The Deputy Minister also mentioned the need for strengthened institutions for improved productivity and quality, and committed Tanzania to establish programs to embed Kaizen quality and productivity improvement in all ministries at all levels. This was attended with the integrating the approach into various national policies. Following from the opening session, we heard a keynote address from the CEO, Dr. Mayaki, CEO of AUDA, who spoke on the emerging needs of industrialization in Africa and highlighted the importance of quality and productivity improvement for achieving our vision as is outlined under Agenda 2063. Dr. Mayaki focused the discussions around adapting the current context, adapting to the current context to achieve this vision that is outlined, and the challenges that Africa is facing, such as the emerging imperative to create roughly 20 million jobs over the next 20 years. And key to this will be the support to the development of the continent's micro, small, medium, and enterprises. Dr. Mayaki's keynote address was followed by a presentation on the activities of the African Kaizen Initiative by Mr. Getahun, which included some of the key steps and challenges along the way. We heard some very rich discussion points on the experience of 3 countries in the development and implementation of their Kaizen project. These countries were South Africa, Tunisia, and Tanzania. We look forward to further discussion in the working groups on some of the priorities outlined by Mr. Motiba, CEO of Productivity in South Africa, Mr. Makhlufi from UTPQP, and Mr. Mulangali from MIT in the coming sessions. The last component of the online session, as you've just heard, was the very illuminating cross-continental panel discussion on how to strengthen the competitiveness of African firms and businesses and the roles of stakeholders in a changing environment. The interventions from our colleagues at Brixham Bank, Dr. Zanamawi, Madam Nadine from ARSO, African Organization for Standardization, Mr. Homasan from JICA, and Engineer Chisewilo from Intermec Engineering Limited, helped to frame some of the key issues for the continent and facilitated a deeper dive into a few of these key issues. Specifically, why Africa still displays some lagging competitiveness issues, what some of the lessons are from some of the other contexts around the world, in particular the Asian region, that can be shared in a mutual learning process, what governments and regulatory bodies should do to facilitate improved competitiveness through strengthening and harmonizing standards for improved trade, and finally, the needs we have as a continent for establishing a collaborative framework for promoting intra-Africa trade and competitiveness at the continental level according to a shared agenda. Now, colleagues, this was just touching on a few very key points that came out of today's very rich discussions. I think we can pat ourselves on the back for a successful online session this morning, despite the challenges of having a hybrid session. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Ms. Kaiko Sano, Director General for Economic Development Department at JICA, to give us some closing remarks. Sano-san, over to you. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, His Excellency Mr. William Tate Olenasha, Deputy Minister of Prime Minister's Office Investment, the United Republic of Tanzania, Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki, Chief Executive Officer of the NEPAD, Mrs. Ron Omao, Senior Policy Officer, African Union Commission, and Ambassador Shinichi Goto, Ambassador of Japan to Tanzania, and the members of JICA projects, members of the Pan-African Productivity Association, Kaizen practitioners from public and private sectors, researchers, development partners, distinguished participants. It is my great pleasure to deliver a few words upon the closing of the first day of African Kaizen Annual Conference 2021. This is the fourth edition of the conference, and it is held for the first time in the hybrid format of an online conference and on-site events in Tanzania. This is because of COVID-19 pandemic. However, more than 700 people are registered for this conference, which is the largest number of participation ever. The pandemic affects our lives in all aspects, but I believe that by choosing appropriate means, we can continue our activities and move forward. I would like to thank all participants and the speakers for taking part in, and express my sincere gratitude for the government of the United Republic of Tanzania and all the NEPAD for co-organizing this conference with JICA. Dear participants, the Africa Kaizen Annual Conference aims to share knowledge, deepen the understanding of Kaizen, and come up with some policy implications among stakeholders, including policymakers, implementing organizations, practitioners, researchers, and development partners. This year, we set the subtitle of the conference as Opportunities to Accelerate Industrialization and Trade in Africa, streamlining Kaizen QPI with digital technologies, startups, SME development, and homegrown economic activities in Africa. In the last year's AKAC, under the complete online conference, we discussed what the context of the industrialization in Africa in the era of COVID-19 is, and how Kaizen, quality and productivity improvement activities can contribute in this context. This year, in the same situation that we all remain under the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, we gathered to consider the role of Kaizen in terms of digital technologies, startups, homegrown SME development in Africa. All of those are the priority issues for acceleration of industrialization and the trade in Africa, coping with COVID-19. Distinguished participants, in his keynote speech, Dr. Mayaki emphasized the Kaizen should play catalytic role and be inclusive, be transformative on the ground, and to make an impact and beneficial to all, even in the new digital era, with the expectation of 200 million jobs to be created. In this regard, I hope to remind the importance of the 5-year Africa Kaizen Initiative Action Plan, which was elaborated last year under the strong ownership of the AKI stakeholders, such as Africa Kaizen implementing countries and members of Pan-African Productivity Association. I fully agree with Dr. Mayaki's attention and would like to congratulate the success of the effort made by all AKI stakeholders and representatives of each countries. All of those were shared by Mr. Getafun today. Regarding the cross-continental panel discussion, I would like to appreciate all the panelists and participants to share your passion for strengthening the competitiveness of African local firms and businesses. I'm convinced that the farm competitiveness is really needed in Africa, and Kaizen approach surely contributes to enhancing it by learning each other. Tomorrow, we expect the Africa Kaizen Award ceremony, and we will know how the selected African farms have achieved the outstanding performance in Kaizen activities. I hope this award will encourage the farms and enterprises to try more for enhancing the farm competitiveness so as to contribute to the African economic growth. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the examination committee and supervisors for their efforts made for the implementation of the award. Distinguished participants, before concluding my remarks, on behalf of JICA, I would like to express my deepest gratitude again to the government of the United Republic of Tanzania for hosting this conference. Due to the pandemic of COVID-19, we are staying at our own places. However, we actually share the enthusiasm in Tanzania for acceleration of industrial development through Tanzanian model of Kaizen. The honorable presence of the Deputy Minister shows the strong commitment of the Tanzanianization of Kaizen. I would also like to express my sincere appreciation to Dr. Mayaki and his team at ODA-NEPAD and AUC and Embassy of Japan and my colleague at the JICA office in Tanzania and all people involved in making this conference happen. Finally, the African Kaizen Initiative continues until year 2027. And now we all sit and discuss, which is of course important. However, we should take action promptly. I hope that At the end of this conference, we will elaborate concrete actions and start to make them happen for realizing the opportunities to accelerate industrialization and trade in Africa. I wish the fruitful deliberation in 3 days, and it will be successfully summarized at the communique at the outcome of this year's AKSC. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, and asante sana.
Closing remarks. So, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the close of today's online session. I would like to echo the thanks that Sano-san has just provided to the partners and to the organizing committee and so on, and really just to highlight our thanks to the interpretation team who've been doing a fantastic job to make sure that we are all communicating on an equal platform and understand each other. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me please close for today this online session. I will now hand over to Oga-san for a housekeeping announcement by the Secretariat.